Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the next edition of AmiSights. I'm Ami Kassar, your host, along with my co-host, Lynn Ozer, aka SBA Queen. So happy to have my friend and EO mate, Ben Smith, on the call. Ben is an extraordinary entrepreneur with an interesting background, and I'm so excited to have him here to share his story and see what we can learn from him, and there is a lot. Ben, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Ami and Lynn, and it's great to be here.
Ben, tell us everything.
Start at the beginning.
How long do we have?
As long as you want.
It's always nice to hear, when you started on your journey and what brought you to becoming an entrepreneur. So, if it was your newspaper route, you can go all the way back to that.
Well, that my mom and dad, growing up, my mom owned a restaurant downtown Philadelphia. She had a supper club. My dad, he owned a couple corner stores throughout the city of Philadelphia. And it's in one of those stores that I remember my uncle teaching me how to count change, how to make change, in the cash register. So I think part of my entrepreneurial journey may have started there. But I did go a different route after that, after leaving school, I went into the management consulting field, and I spent 25 years or so in IT consulting before I got into being a acquisition entrepreneur.
That's great. And which company? You were there for was that after you went to school to be in finance or something like that?
No, actually,
marketing management.
No, actually, you know what? I went to school to study engineering, and unfortunately, in my senior year, I had to leave school. But one of the upsides to that was that I was working for a defense contractor in Virginia, and they were going through a management consulting engagement, and I was kind of part of that team, and I got a opportunity to understand their process. I told them about my situation, and they were like, "Oh, okay, well, you know what? If you want to come work for us, since you've already kind of been trained, you're welcome.
That's great.
We're going to bring you in." And I think my salary might have been like maybe about $24,000 a year, somewhere around that. And this is back in 1987, 1988.
Right.
And that's how I got started in the field.
That's great. So you were busy consulting others, and the bug just got you.
What made you change?
I'm sorry?
What was the change? What pulled you out of corporate life into this crazy world we all live in?
So I guess there's two phases to my life. In my first phase, which is probably my 20s, through my late 30s, I had a great IT and management consulting career. Ran into some personal issues, and for a couple of years there, I was kind of not the person that I wanted to be. And kind of coming out of that phase of my life, I went to work for a company called Zodiac Aerospace, French global aerospace manufacturer. And there, I was their first hire here in the Americas for IT support, and I grew and I flourished with that company, really with an expertise with a specific ERP application. And eventually my role turned into being a global project manager, global program manager, rolling out our systems, for every new, not me all the time, but a number of our new acquisitions that the company went through. And that's basically how the company grew. So I got a chance to kind of see up close and front this whole merger and acquisition process that took place. And eventually I left there. I went to work for another company. And one of the things that I found in that company was that I didn't want somebody else directing or my story anymore. And so January 2020, I decided to leave full-time employment and told my wife, I was like, you know what, I'm going to become an independent IT consultant. And she's like, okay, great, I'm support you. That was January 2020. February 2020, bam, COVID hit, right? And my wife was like, hey, do you think you did the right thing? I was like, yeah, I'm pretty confident. One of the good things about the application that I work with and that I still work with today is that there's not enough of us to go around the globe. So I was very fortunate with in March of 2020, got my first contract, and I've had 4 contracts since as a solopreneur in the independent IT consulting space. But at the same time, one of the things that I recognize is that the chair that I'm sitting in right now, you know, for IT consulting, you know what, I got to be here 55, 60 hours a week. And that was something that I didn't want to do long term. So the next question was, what, well, what do you do? Well, I can build out maybe an IT practice doing what I'm doing now. Looked at that, and like I mentioned earlier, there's not enough of us to go around. So trying to build out that type of practice, like, just wouldn't work. So then I had talked with a friend of mine that I went to school with, very successful entrepreneur, and he was like, hey, listen, you know what? You should really think about buying a business. He's like, this is what I did, like, and this is how I did it. And I was like, oh, okay, you know what? That really resonated with me. So I spent about 2 years really trying to understand financials, understanding what does it take to acquire a small to medium-sized business. And after that journey, and after going probably through about 50 deals, looking at at least 50 sims, in all different industries across the board, I came across a company called Covered Wagon out in Richland, PA. And today, that's the business that I acquired 2.5 years ago. And we deliver custom kitchen cabinetry in the Northeast region. So we deliver probably for about 15 to 20 manufacturers uh, within Pennsylvania as well as New Jersey. And we deliver in the Northeast region anywhere from Maine down through Virginia. And so that's kind of how I got into being an acquisition entrepreneur.
Ben, let's back up a little bit.
Sure.
Let's and then I really want to learn all about Covered Wagon and that journey, but
Mm-hmm.
tell us why, like, I made the decision to leave corporate America, but I was like pushed out by a bankruptcy of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I don't look back, and it was well, what happened was really sad, probably the best thing that ever happened to me personally for my own growth and my own development.
Sure.
That wasn't your story. Picking up and leaving, I suspect life was pretty good. You were making good money and this and that. I suspect, like, digging for us a little bit, like, how did you do that? That's a gutsy move. Like,
Uh,
what was driving you?
well, I mean, yes, it was a gut move, and really the gutsy move was prior to that, I was working for a company, and you know I did 3 different projects for them. The first project, I was a IT lead for manufacturing and procurement teams, implementing their ERP for Canada, North America, and Mexico. And that project went great, no problems. I came back to that company again as a project manager, and the folks that I was working for as peers were now kind of working for me as a project manager, right? Which is usually, I mean, that's not a problem. It's very common in the industry. And one of the things that started to happen was that the relationships were really difficult, throughout that project. And one of the things, or a number of things, transpired. And actually, it came time for my performance review. Uh, and there was one area that they dinged me pretty hard on. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, you know what? I called HR and I was like, hey, you know what? Can I respond to this? Because believe it or not, in my 25-year career, I've never really taken notes about interactions and different things like that. But in this case here, I had a notebook full of things, that I've talked with, senior management and so forth. And I gave my feedback, well knowing that there could be a possibility of, they might want to let me go. And that's eventually what happened. And and I can't go into the details of it, but there was legal action that took place. And kind of coming out of that, that's why I made my statement earlier that I no longer wanted to allow somebody else to dictate my story, or what I was going to do. And I really wanted to take more control of my life, what I was doing, and the quality of life that I was having.
Ben, do you think that came from that event, or do you think that was something brewing for a long time?
I think it came from that event, Ami. That I was quite comfortable, working, in corporate America as part of the IT and consulting team, implementing ERP systems. It's my thing, it's my specialty. That's what I do.
Good for you. Do you look back and do you ever miss those days, or are you confident you did the right thing?
Oh no, I definitely feel like I did the right thing. And the great thing about being an acquisition entrepreneur or an entrepreneur in general, uh, depending on the path that you take, is that you have the ability to do multiple things.
Right.
So in my acquisition, very important component to that was making sure that there were people, on the ground that could run day to day and really kind of be the integrators for me and me taking more of the visionary role, because EOS is a very important part of what I do today, and that's part of what facilitates the running of the business on a day-to-day basis. And also it gives me the ability to kind of keep my hand in the IT consulting field, on a part-time basis, which is something that I really love to do.
That's what I
Got it.
was going to ask. So when you said you had your IT consulting business and you had these projects and you were sitting in that chair for hours on end, did you ever have any employees or subcontractors, or that was the problem? You were the one who was doing it.
I was the one that was doing it.
Yeah. So now you can still do that and continue to run this new business.
Yes.
What are the similarities between being a solo entrepreneur and having employees and all of that? Let's talk about those
Sure.
challenges.
Yeah, well, I mean, anytime that you're dealing with individuals and human beings, right, there's always that management, right? Uh, over the course of my career, I've managed teams as small as 2 or 3 and up to 30 or 40, right? Um, so that whole skill set is just so applicable in terms of being a business owner, right? That you have a leadership team, you have employees, and you have issues, right? You have people that, what, I don't like the way expenses are being done. I don't like the way my schedule's being done. So you have all of those issues, even though they're different between the two environments, but generally they're still the same in terms of the nature of what they are, right? And so I really feel as though that my background in consulting and project management really kind of have set me up for success in terms of managing a business today. That believe it or not, had an issue between my two integrators. I run two integrators because I need them to do separate things and not and I can't have one reporting to the other, right? It's one of the things that I learned in this process, because we had an issue at one point where the personalities were just conflicting, right? And so I kind of had to go in and step in and say, hey, let's figure this out, and so you just start making decisions and figuring it out.
These were employees of the former company.
Yeah,
So,
one was a former employee and the other was a new hire.
new
So
hire.
one is my operations manager, and then the other one is the office manager. She handles all of the accounting, HR, and DOT compliance of the business.
I see.
Tell us, Ben. So you, you quit your job, or you let go of however whatever happened,
Mhm.
and say that was on Friday. What do you do on Monday?
What did I do on Monday?
Yeah.
I picked up the phone, called a friend of mine, right? A guy that I went to school with. He's a few years older than me, and we talked about some things. And when he talked about, hey, you know what, why don't you build something out that leaves your own legacy, right? I was just like, oh, okay. You know what? That sounds really interesting. And I remember it so clearly that I was driving down the turnpike and I had passed my exit. I had gone two exit past my exit because I was just so deep in thought. And and I remember picking the phone back up in the car and I was like, Joe, all right, this is what I'm going to do. He was like, hey, I'm with you. Whatever I can do to support you, let's go for it. And at that point, I started listening to podcasts and actually I came across a EOS podcast, Gino Wickman, and I was listening to it. I'm like, oh man, okay, this is how to run a small business. This is the system, because I'm all about methodology and framework, right? I'm a project manager. That's what gets me going, right? So that was the first thing. The second thing that I heard Gino talking about was, the EOS quality of life. Being able to do the things that you want to do with the people that you want to do them with, and having the freedom to live the life that you want to live, and I was just, wow, that was just so impactful for me. So, um, and then kind of what happened was that as I was going through different business deals, having different seller calls, you know what? I started talking to small business owners that were implementing EOS. And they're like, hey, we're working with EOS. This is what we're doing. It's a game changer for us. You know, um, and so, so from that perspective, I kind of knew, what I wanted to do at that point. I was just dead set on making that happen, and, as you know, as an entrepreneur, as you get laser focused, you know what, you're going for it. And that's basically what I did.
So what happened next?
So after that, um, let me see here. So let me try and so yeah, so I found this company, right? And you know, and it's been a little bit of a challenge. We're in an industry where we have CDL drivers, and that's been tough. And we're in an industry that requires physical labor. So some of our issues is around really finding good people. That.
Let's back up if we can 1 second. How
Mhm.
did you find the company? You went through 50 of them. Tell us about that.
So I had connected with a company that kind of that trains folks uh, on small business merger and acquisitions. Right, I went through.
What was it called?
Company was called Acquirer,
Okay.
and they
Good
had
name.
they had a 15 module training program, right? That really took you through everything from understanding who you are as an individual through post LOI activities, right? And along that journey also they gave you all of the financial modeling tools, that you would need to assess a business, to look at intrinsic value, to look at that coverage, within the business and all of those things that the bankers like to see from a financial perspective, right? And then the other kicker to it was that if they liked your deal, they would invest with you, up to 30% of the down payment, and you had to go through and you had to present to their investment committee. Here's my slide deck. They had a standard slide deck. You put your slide deck together and you present it. They didn't want to invest in my deal, but I liked the deal you know. And so I moved forward.
Did they show you deals, or did you have to go out and find them on your own?
I had to go out and find at that point where they were, I had to go out and find them on my own. So I was on the different brokerage sites, couple guys here locally and in the Philadelphia area, and then some other national brokerage sites. And so basically I had all of my alerts set up probably on about 8 or 9 different sites, and I was getting the emails, boom, 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 boom. So basically I was working consulting 12 hours a day, pretty much from 7 in the morning to 7 at night. And then from about 8 to about 11 every night, for a few months, I was going through business prospectuses and doing financial modeling and so forth, and just trying to figure out, okay, which ones do I want to take the next step in terms of really contacting the broker, understanding more about the deal, and getting it at least to the point where we're having a seller discussion.
How did you find that process? Was it frustrating? Did you like it? Like, tell us about that process.
I enjoyed the process because it was just so new to me, that it really revved my engine, and it just really it kept me hyper focused on my goal. That I was really starting to learn some new things about the business world, what it took to acquire a business, how to analyze a business. And these were kind of things that I kind of did in my consulting career, that I was always in the P&L of the companies that we were working with, uh, looking at the cost, different things like, around that, because we always had to figure out what's the ROI, what are we really doing here, and so forth. But from this perspective, it was really more about understanding EBITDA, seller discretionary earnings. What does that look like? What does that mean? And how do you really analyze the business that you want to acquire? So for me, it was just something that I really enjoyed during the evening. Like, did my wife like me being, downstairs in this chair, 20 hours a day? No, but but she was supportive though. Like,
It's interesting to me the way that you did do your due diligence, and you didn't specifically have an industry or anything like that. You mentioned that you're very process oriented. So was that what you were looking for? A business that could be just you could relate to because of the processes, and you didn't feel the need to have a passion or a background in the service or product they were providing?
Yes, to a certain extent, Len, that I was industry agnostic. There were certain industries that I knew that weren't for me, but having my consulting background, I had an opportunity to work in a number of different industries, And so for me, like, when I look at a business, it's all about a process,
Right.
right? There's process A, right? There is a input, a process, and an output. That's just how I evaluate. That's how I think about a business,
Interesting.
and with my background, that's all it is. Now there are things that like, my wheelhouse, manufacturing, warehousing, logistics, transportation, sales, so those are the projects that I've done over a 25-year period that, I can pretty much walk in and say, okay, you know what? I pretty much understand the business, for the most part.
Mhm.
But there's always that learning curve really to
Right.
understand the underlying things that really move the business. So
So
for
when you were
example,
looking for businesses, how important was it to you to buy a business where the staffing itself was in place? I know you mentioned that you do have a new hire in the business, but since you would be working on the processes, the people that actually delivered the service or the product or did the talk a little bit about how you assess personnel of a company, outside of the black and white P&L.
yeah, that's a good question. And I think part of that comes from having again, my background in consulting, like, really having to interview people and talk about processes, and sometimes, what you're talking with uh, supervisors, managers, directors, right, about other people that are on the production floor, right? So you kind of, over a period of time, you kind of build this tribal knowledge of what you're looking to hear, and then kind of equating that to how the business is performing, right?
So
So,
Ben, sorry, go ahead, finish up.
no, I was just going to say that I spent a lot of time with the business owners, really talking about the business, which was very important, and part of that acquirer process was the seller discussion format and template, that really, like, they had a list of, I don't know, probably about 100 different questions, like, that you would kind of work through. Um, and, you know, and kind of once you go through that interview process, you really start to get a good idea of what's happening in the business, for the most part. Like, it's not 100% foolproof, but you learn to do your due diligence. And one of the things that was happening and that we talked a lot about with the individual who was the existing dispatcher scheduler in the business. And he was really the guy that was making the business go. That he's the one that was on the phones with the customers, talking day in and day out, arranging pickups, arranging storage, arranging deliveries, communicating with the drivers and the trucks every day. So he was key and critical. That was the first part. Second part was that both of the owners, husband and wife, had to stay on for a year, to do the transition. So part of it was mentoring me in the business, and then also elevating this other individual to a point where, about a little after about a year, I promoted him to the operations manager role.
Mhm.
So Ben,
Now,
you finally you pick your target. You go, this is the one I want.
Mm-hmm.
What happened next?
So after that, it was basically doing the financial due diligence, legal due diligence, and really, in my financial modeling, what I look for is that I look for companies that the EBITDA and the SDE are relatively close. Just for my risk profile in terms of what I feel comfortable with is that I don't want an SDE that has 50 different things in it, right? Because that's too much to negotiate and too much to deal with. One, two, when that SDE, at least for me, is closer to the EBITDA number, it really tells me what's running through the business and how much money is really there in the business, so that when I'm doing my financial modeling and I'm coming to folks like you saying, hey, you know what, here's the EBITDA number, SDE number, and we're still able to cover the debt coverage ratio, right? Is everybody happy? So after that point, I went through LOI. We had to go through some negotiations in that process in terms of, the final purchase price of the business. And for the most part, that went pretty smoothly. The broker was pretty good. I ran into some brokers that I was just like, wow, you know what, man, I just don't even like the way that you're presenting the deal right now. And so once I decided to pull the trigger on it, we signed an LOI, and it took us maybe about it took us about 5 months to close on the deal. It took a little bit longer than expected. The bank underwriting process was a little bit more intense than I expected. And there were just a lot of documents and a lot of things to get together. And remember also, I'm still sitting in my chair 12 hours a day trying to figure out how to do all of this. So I was really multitasking, on both of these endeavors at the same time.
What do you tell our listeners what STE means?
SDE?
Yeah.
Oh, seller discretionary earnings.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. Yep. Basically everything that a business owner is running through the business, that includes their basic compensation, health insurance, 401k. And then also it could be the cars that they're paying for, their telephones, right? Their internet access, their cable, their gym memberships, their charitable contributions, and so forth. So all of those good nuggets that run through a business.
Exactly.
Lynn's going to want to know about the financing process. Come on,
Yeah.
Lynn, answer your question.
So you said that that you were working with a bank. How did you choose the bank? And did they, what were the requirements, to do that? Did you go conventional? Did you get an SBA guarantee? How did you do that?
Yeah, and you know what? I came across multi-funding on a different deal, right? The very first company that I really targeted was an HVAC company in New Jersey. Lesson learned was the whole thing around the master license, that's required.
Oh, yes.
And actually, I spoke with Joe with multi-funding. I didn't know who multi-funding was, and in the course of that conversation, he was like, well, you know what? I really think that this is going to be an issue, right? And so I put that deal down. And when I found the second target, at this point I was still kind of working also with my friend of mine, and he was like, "Hey, listen, you know what? I work with M&T Bank. I think you should give them a call," which is a SAP for EO, right?
Mhm,
And that's who I worked with on the deal.
mhm. Yeah, did you get conventional financing?
I went SBA financing.
Yeah.
Yep,
And
SBA.
did you find that the process can be trying, but were the advantages were that you had to put less money down?
Absolutely. Less money down, 10% down. Seller put 10 had a seller 10% seller note on the deal. Yeah, and and it worked out well. I mean, overall, we had our family discussions, let's just say, throughout the process.
Mhm.
Uh, because sometimes the deal was kind of changing, it was kind of moving back and forth, and he was just like, "Hey, Ben, you know what? I've already submitted this stuff to underwriting, you
Yeah.
know." And once we get it in underwriting, when you start making material changes in your deal, we got to pull it out of underwriting potentially and restart the process,
Uh,
right?
you were talking about, figuring out the value of the business. And then when you go through the SBA process, I know there has to be an outside business valuation. How close were you to what the business actually valued at?
Actually, the business valued more than I calculated, like, based on my own financial modeling terms, which was really nice. That I did have to go with a third party, like, through the bank, you
Right,
know,
right.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the valuation came back probably maybe about 700,000 or 800,000 more than the purchase price.
Hmm, good for you.
That's great.
Ben, you buy the business, you close on Friday, you walk in on Monday, what happens next?
Employee meeting. Hey, here's the new owner,
How
right?
many employees?
So there were the two owners, scheduler, dispatcher, and then at that time we had 7 drivers. And I walk in, hey, I'm Ben Smith, and so, but it was a very coordinated activity, that
Did
we
they know
talked
you were
about.
coming? Did they know the transaction was happening, or were they surprised?
They were surprised, they
Mhm.
didn't know. So the previous owners kept it pretty low key. I think maybe the scheduler dispatcher may have had an idea, but he just wasn't sure or not. Which was fine. And we had an employee meeting, and really in that employee meeting, the first thing that I wanted to let folks know was that, hey, you know what, that this is a very good and thriving business, and I'm not the guy that's going to come in to break it, to fix it, to even try and make it better. That what, there's not going to be any material changes at this point. That we are going, for the sake of the transition and consistency, we are going to keep everything as is. The scheduling is going to stay the same. The owners are going to be here, right? Like, and really this period of time, like, in the next 3 to 6 months is more about me, getting to know who you are and you getting to know me. So I really took it as an opportunity to be honest and transparent about who I am as an individual, as a business owner, what my story was, and I shared it with the folks, that, hey, this is who I am, you know, and uh, you know, and I wanted them to know that I'm here, like, open door policy.
As an individual who was an employee of a bank for a long time and went through 7 acquisitions
Mm,
and mergers, um, it just makes me laugh because on the first day they do say, "Oh, everything's going to be wonderful and nothing's going to change," and so
yeah.
forth. But it for the individual who is being bought, it's nerve-wracking, and the morale in the business
Mhm,
is hard to keep up.
mhm,
I mean, I don't know. In a small business, I'm sure it's completely different than
mhm,
in a huge corporation where they don't have the day-to-day interaction with the
mhm,
future owner. But
mhm.
I'm sure that was reassuring to them to believe that their jobs were not in question. The drivers, you mentioned you have 7 drivers. Are they employees or are they 1099s?
All employees,
Oh.
all employees.
Sorry.
Bless you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like, that, I asked them, like, I met with them individually. I was like, hey, like, help me understand, like, what you guys do on a day-to-day basis. Like, what's good, what's bad, what would you like to see improved? And believe it or not, the most common theme was that we need new uniforms.
That's so funny.
Right?
That's interesting.
That
Yeah.
the previous owner, he was a Marine, right? And the uniforms were very Marine-like with Marine-like material, And now these guys, what I mean, during the summer, they're out in 100-degree weather carrying cabinets up and down steps, right? And they're like, hey, can we just get some, outerwear, like, that's dry fit, that's nice and comfortable. And I was just like, done deal. You know what I mean? One of the very first things that I did for them. One of the other things that I looked at that we're finally getting to was also enhancing the benefit package. Of just adding on some other things that, a few of the guys had families. Hey, we're adding dental insurance, we're adding life insurance, like, we're adding vision, those types of things. So it was just really about, like, making sure that they were comfortable. Now, with that being said, in about 8 months or so, I lost 3 senior drivers, for various reasons, not due to any major changes in the business. They seem to be more around the personal side of things. Um, like, at least that's the way that it was explained, which was fine.
How difficult was it to replace them?
Very difficult, very difficult. Last year, we hired 4 people. Those 4 people are no longer with us. And that was a very expensive lesson for me, around the hiring and recruiting process. That as a new business owner, lesson learned is that, what, don't hire just to hire the right person. And that was a very expensive lesson that we had. What we saw was that over about a 6-month period, we had a number of damages. We had 17 damages, that came through. And it was just like, whoa, hold on, what's happening here? So basically, we had to let those people go. And in December of this past year, I sat down and kind of rewrote our hiring and onboarding process, which is a completely new process that we are implementing as we speak now. We've just hired 2 new individuals, and that seemed to be working out pretty well in terms of what we're doing. We now have a skills training checklist. We have an onboarding checklist. And actually, we hired a part-time planner scheduler in the office so that the operations manager can do some of the initial training with new folks, because that's just very important, for what we do. And really the most critical thing that we do with our cabinets is the loading component of it. That we need to make sure that what we're taking onto our trucks, right, are damage free, because once we take possession, we're responsible. And then the whole, because we blanket wrap every single cabinet, right? Like, and there is an art and a science to loading a truck with custom kitchen cabinets, that I have a much greater appreciation for now. So it's very important for us to train those individuals in that key aspect of what we do.
When did your entrepreneurial journey take you to EO?
So at around that same time, I was listening to an EOS podcast. I heard Gino talk about EO, and I was just like, what is this EO? I had no idea. And I looked it up. I was like, oh, okay, this sounds interesting. This looks interesting. Like, a whole group of business owners, like, around the globe, that work together, to figure out what they're doing. And I'm like, well, you know what? That might just work for me. And so I looked up the Philadelphia chapter, and I connected with Katie. That was probably October, November of 2022, I think. And I went to a EO event downtown, met Marcia, who was the president at the time. And Marcia was just so inviting, um, that I felt like I knew her for such a long time. Uh, and the people that I met at the event were just very open and honest, even talking about their businesses, talking about their issues. I'm just like, wow, yep, I got that issue, right? Even though different industry, I got that same issue. And then really like, talking about, what they see as the benefits in being associated with the organization. And so at that point, I was like, okay, you know what, I'm going to go into EOA. From a financial perspective, the company would have qualified for EO, but I kind of just wanted to dip my toes in it and really understand it. And so I got a chance to go to the EOA learning days, which gave me more structure around what I had already learned, even around finances, strategy, execution, people, and so forth. I was just like, okay, you know what, I'm really, I really think that this is a very positive thing. And then Ami came in, as president. We started talking, and he was like, "Hey, listen, you know what? I really think maybe, you should think about going to EO because there is a difference, and there is certainly a difference between EOA and EO."
Just for our listeners, EOA has companies with revenue between 250 and a million, and EO is companies with revenue for $1 million or more. And so there's differences in the program, different based on the level. So,
Great.
Ben, one of the things that I love about you is you're always committed to giving back. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I think about my journey, where I was, about 20 years ago, what I came through personally, and to where I'm at today, and especially over the last 4 years or so, I'm like, hey, you know what? I really think that I can tell a story about an individual, right, that has gone through some downsides, that's recovered, and is now more or less back on the upswing of things. And here's how I did it. And I think, and a very big part of that story, like, and how I frame it, like, internally for me, is through one of the EO tools of the Lifeline. That I had an opportunity to kind of go back, like, and lifeline my life out, and see the positives and the negatives, right? And then kind of once I went through that process, the other great thing about EO has been that it has exposed me to other concepts, methodologies, and tools, right? That allow you kind of to assess, what's happening in your life, you know. And so as part of that journey, I came across a couple books, Mindset by Carol Dweck, um, Dan Sullivan, Who Not How, Gap and Gain, um, Dan Sullivan. And really what I started to do is that I started taking these concepts and these thought processes and really placing them on my lifeline, saying, hey, when was I in a fixed mindset? When was I in a growth mindset? Who were my who's, that helped me through this journey? Because I had all of these things in my head, but you know what? But I didn't have again, I'm a project manager. I like framework, right? I like methodology. I like being able to put things in context. And these concepts, allowed me to have a a verbiage where I could express, like, what I was thinking and what I was feeling, you know. And as part of that journey, I started looking for opportunities to say, hey, how can I, help that new business owner who is just trying to figure it out? Like, because I know what that feels like. What business am I doing? Do I understand what a business plan is? Do I understand what basic financials are? And then that's when I connected with SCORE. And so I've been with SCORE probably for about a year now. I've had an opportunity to work with a couple of really folks that are just trying to figure it out, and like, just what, 2 weeks ago, I got a client that is doing exactly the same thing that I'm doing right now. And he was like, hey, you know what? I didn't expect this from SCORE. So I think it's, and it's really a great feeling. The other last week, I was down at St. Joe's University with their veterans SBA program. Got a chance to sit down with a couple of vets that are trying to figure out their business model. And I told them about EOS, and the different books and, different approaches that you can take to understanding your business and so forth, and that was it just felt very fulfilling, to see people kind of see their eyes light up a little bit, see the light bulb go on. Wow, you know what? Thank you. I really appreciate that. And oh, let me find this right now and bookmark this, and because I think it really is important,
it's a virtuous circle, and
yep.
bless you for doing all that stuff.
Yep.
So
Yeah, and community is one of our core values, that we have in the business. That we certainly believe that in order to grow, we have to give.
absolutely. Ben, looking forward 5-10 years from now, what do you see for yourself?
Oh man, you know what? Our EO forum, we just took a retreat down to Costa Rica, and we were in an EO house, on our house. And I was just like, okay, you know what? This is where I like to be 10 years from now. No, but in all sincerity, that part of my business model is to own multiple small to medium-sized businesses. That's what I'm looking forward to. So probably sometime late this year, I will kind of start the process of looking for the next acquisition. That's simply what I want to do. That's kind of, the life that I envision, that I'm really taking this time here in this first acquisition to really work out the model and what I need to do, how to improve it, and what am I looking for in the next acquisition. So hopefully, when I look at my VTO 10 years from now, it's 2 to 3 businesses that I have, with revenue of somewhere around, somewhere between 8 and 10 million.
I love it. I love it. Ben, it's been a pleasure. Lynn, is there anything I should have asked Ben that I didn't?
No, I'm really happy that he got to tell us about his passion for giving back and helping young entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs. That's great. And it was really nice to hear your story, and I wish you so much success going forward. Thank you for being with us.
No, well, thank you for having me. It's definitely been a pleasure, and looking forward to the next time that we talk.
Ben, my pleasure. Our pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.